heavy investment on your part in this sort of the deep history of the character, in the brokenness, going way back, going, as it were, before the events in the play. You were interested in the mess, the brokenness. And it seemed to me, as I watched you direct it, and play it, of course, that there was something in it about her vulnerability which just was a touchstone for you, somehow.
Yes. Is that what it is? But also the degree to her, you know, she's barreling forward, you know, full speed ahead at self-destruction.
Yes.
At a brick wall. At the same time that there's also part of her that knows that she's heading in that direction and she wants to be saved.
Yeah.
You know, she's not necessarily able or willing to save herself and to do what it takes to pull herself, you know, off of that train. But she knows that there's a chance that somebody else, you know. It
was pretty mesmerising, that, because, I mean, what she had was, in her suffering, she had incredible strength and spirit. You know, desperate for survival, leaning into survival, but somehow falling short.
Yeah, that tension is fascinating, and somehow that tension exists inside me, and I feel like it almost still does, you know, exist inside me, even though I feel like more than Blanche, I win at the end of the day. You know, so far I keep winning, and jumping off the train. But there is something definitely about that.
Could you introduce us to that space, though, Gillian? It's the hardest thing to talk about in a way, but there's Tennessee William. He's written a classic. It's an accepted classic. We know the words. We all quote them. It seems set in concrete. And then you come in and say, no, it's not set in concrete. It's liquid. I'm going to insert myself. These are the lines. This is the situation. The director and the company are going to go somewhere with this. Can you just describe that?
I think that's the director, though. I think that's the director. I think before, you know, that's another thing that happens in starting from a clean slate, at least in my experience, is what that allows you is, if you're with a good director, which Benedict was, that you can be led to those places. Yeah. And I had no idea where we were headed. I had no idea how she was going to end up sitting in that world, how it was going to sit in relation to this revolving stage that we were on, or any of it. And he, you know, slowly, you know, pulled at all of us and guided us at the same time towards who we became as these characters. And I couldn't have, you know, it could have been different under a different director's hand. I don't know. I don't know if that was the Blanche that was always inside me, and that's how she would have, I would have manifested her, no matter who the director was. I don't know.
As a side issue, during that process you described of being led by a director towards that clarity, have you ever thought in the middle of that journey, this isn't working, this director's wrong?
No, certainly not with Blanche.
No, I mean, in other parts, throughout your career.
I've certainly thought, she doesn't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
I thought that meant,
and how does the character creation
What
survive?
am I doing here? Why did I say yes? Oh my God. I thought
you start ringing people. Oh my God. Is that something that you have to learn to cope with as an actor?
Yeah.
You have an idea of a character, you're on this track now. You've never walked off of a production, as far as I understand, have you?
No, it's not necessarily so much that. It's about, because I'm happy to be led. And very often I show up. I mean, I just did a film in Pittsburgh, and, you know, I mean, sometimes I know exactly. I mean, with historical characters, obviously you know what you want yourself to be like as them, as the final, you know. But and you have to trust yourself, like with Thatcher, you have to trust yourself that at the point that you've got all the bits on and the hair and the clothes and the everything, and that, you know, that it's all going to come together, that the walk and the movements and the voice and the everything, that it's going to, you know, but and then there's the version which I just did, which is where I don't get quite so specific. I mean, that had to be so specific, Thatcher. And always something I just did where kind of a loony character, not particularly well drawn out in the script, went knowing what she was going to look like because I'd done a lot of fittings, no clue who she was, but had to trust and chose to trust, other than some things that I'd made up in my head, that I was going to wait until actually I was kind of there on set with them to see how she turned up. Yeah. You know, and sometimes that happens, and you know, fortunately, I think it went all right in the end.
Oh, totally. I mean, one of the things we're obsessed with, obviously, the RSL, is text, writing, how much of it is embedded in the art of literature.
Oh, but well, obviously, I'll talk about that. I mean, sorry, I'll ask you a question.
Well, that, I mean, it's just really a prompt. I know that you care about this, because perhaps of all the actors that I know, and certainly among your generation, you're actually properly engaged with the question of literary character. You played Lady Deadlock, we talked about Lily Bart. You've got a relationship with text, and with, as it were, arriving at a character out of a famous text. Can you just give us a little...
I mean, I know with Lily Bart that you know, I really studied the novel. And same for Bleak House, because there's only so much that a screenplay can hold, and particularly with something that is not multi-series but a single film like House of Mirth, you know, there's going to be so many things that are that the film is not going to be able to encompass that are in the book, and on the one hand you have to be able to immerse yourself in the novel, but let go enough that you don't then ring the director every 5 minutes and say, why isn't this bit in it, and why isn't that bit, and I think my character would do this, and you know, and same with The Crown. You know, working on The Crown is very much, it's not a biopic about the prime ministers. You know, it is about the Queen and about the Crown, and everything is through that lens. And so you can do all this research and work, you know, your buns off, but the parameters of what you're working within are only those six episodes, are only those slices of her life, you know. And so even though you may have immersed yourself entirely in, you know, her dealings with unions, or with the IRA, or with whatever it might have been, you don't get to go there. You know, you don't really
No, but
get
you seem to like to absorb the history or the kind of societal pressure.
I feel, I mean, for me, I feel like if I didn't do that, even though it's not touched on within the text of the screenplay, that it would be, I would feel like, one, I'm doing the character a disservice, the human being a disservice, but also that the character would feel thin. Even in just doing the research and filling in all that stuff, is the Rothko.
That was it, that was the layers. I remember this specifically. I mean, it wasn't a huge part, but it was a very important part in the adaptation of War and Peace. Or Madame Scherer, you know, the Salonese team, there she was at the top of the show. It's not like you wanted to study the Napoleonic War, but you needed, I remember us having a conversation on the phone, where you needed to understand what the historical pressure in that room was. And you just found it didn't come into the script. It wasn't something she said, it was something she was, at some level. It's just another layer. But let's get to Thatcher, because it's one of our famous 7 characters. And of course, we've been talking about text a lot, as seems right, but with Thatcher, what we must discuss is the physicality of the acting. That suddenly you were doing something with your mouth, doing something with your head, leaning into people in a different way. I'd never seen anything like that from you before. Of course, there's the look-alike aspect, and there's the big hair and all the rest of it. But more importantly, you did something to your physical being in that part. You dropped your voice. Can you just tell us how you found all that? Because it wasn't obvious that you would. It must have been tough.
Yeah, it wasn't obvious that I would, and I think that is one of the things that the scariest thing, and it's similar with Eleanor Roosevelt, which is, but before, again, I mean, I guess that's the same with all of them, whether they are historical characters, literary characters, or brand new contemporary characters, which is that in order to say yes to something, I have to know that it already exists inside me. There's no point in going searching for it, because and so given that when I asked myself that question, could I be, do I think I could play Thatcher? For whatever reason, I thought that I could. And so then it's about knowing that we're not going to use prosthetics, knowing that that there's a lot of differences between her and I. What are the aside from the givens, which are that you're going to have the helmet, and you're going to have a bodysuit to make my girth a little bit bigger, and the shoes, and knowing that I'm going to study her mannerisms and her walk, and etc., knowing that I'm going to study the voice to the best of my ability and find a place where it exists somewhere between her voice and my voice, so it doesn't sound too over the top or too unreal or whatever. Then there is how to sit inside of her, so that when I'm inside, because it's one thing to look afterwards and go, oh yeah, you look like her, or that's her profile, or whatever, but to actually feel like her from the inside, that you are embodying that. Well,
that's the mountain to climb, I suggest to you, because in a way, the way I'd put it to you is, how do you be her morally? Because, that's the challenge, right? Hugely divisive figure. You've got to play it as a human being. That's not. This isn't a question about do you agree with her politics or not.
No, it's not.
This is somewhere else where it's how do you take on the moral being of a character who some people think is despicable morally, and other people think was great.
It's the same thing. You have to, when Forrest Whitaker played Idi Amin, he actually got to a place where he absolutely thought that he was that Idi was doing the right thing, that he believed that Idi Amin was
worrying.
I know, it is worrying, and I don't think you necessarily need to go that distance, but you do need to get to a place where you understand why they are making the choices that they're making. You understand it based on what you now know of their childhood, of their upbringing, of their relationship with their partner, of their growing up in Grantham and having a father who was an alderman, and all the bits that made up who she was, being, Methodist, and hugely impactful on the decisions that she made as a politician, and how the family worked, inserting yourself and understanding what makes somebody tick is the first step towards understanding how they then get to make those choices, so that you can play that scene, making those choices within the scene, and it feels genuine. It feels like you are embodying.
Well, it was lovely to watch you and Olivia Colman in those scenes, because there's two extremely powerful individuals, both of them regal in different ways, and there's a kind of struggle going on as to who is the more powerful, who is the more correct. Of course, you can see in the performance, as I think, it's a judgment, I guess, you and Pete and the whole crew had to make about how are we going to make her look? Because in some of those scenes, she's working against her own best interest. You can see that she's fucking it up. She's not popular with the Queen in those scenes, and therefore the audience too might be like.
Well, she didn't care. She
didn't care.
She knew she was right.
Yeah. That's what she would have said. Yeah. Okay. And did you ever at any point think, oh Christ, I'm playing somebody who in everyday life I might have objected to, or does that not come into it?
Doesn't come into it.
can't do? Because that would be a bar to playing.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm very keen to play a murderer.
Yeah.
I've never been really given. I don't believe I've ever murdered anybody.
The night is young.
What are you doing later?
No, absolutely. Always ready for killing.
You know, you have to give yourself out. You have to.
So Eleanor Roosevelt. I mean, did that present a different
that's something entirely different, because you can say all that, but I just, you know, one doesn't have to fall in love with her. I completely fell in love with Eleanor. I didn't realize. I knew she was an extraordinary woman, but I had no idea she was as extraordinary a woman as she was. And so it was just, I mean, just the delight in doing that research. And
I mean, we're getting a bit of an acting masterclass from you, and I'm moved to ask you, were there things about Roosevelt that gave you a clue how to do her, how to find this extraordinary woman, other than the lines that are there in the script, obviously?
Yeah. You know, again, it's about, to me, it's about the research. It's about going back to childhood. It's about understanding, you know, the thing about Eleanor that, you know, her self-esteem was unbelievably low for the majority, I mean, for her entire life. You know, she was raised essentially by her grandmother. She lost her mother and then her father when she was 8 and 10. She was sent off to a very mean grandmother, raised and then sent away to go to school, and actually sent to the UK to go to school that was run by a French woman who essentially kind of saved her life and taught her the kind of woman that she could be, you know, and she became that woman. But sorry, I'm so in love with her.
Is it hard sometimes to leave a character behind?
No, it's more, you know, she just had tragedy after tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And her mother used to tell her from a very young age that she was ugly. And the reason why she was going to send her somewhere to be well educated is because she was never going to be able to use her looks. And so she had to use her mind. And she called her granny. Her mum called her. You know, those kinds of things inform a character. And you know, when you watch Eleanor later in life, even when she would give speeches in front of the United Nations, which she helped to, you know, to found, in a sense, she's tentative. Her voice is tentative. She's not. She's always referring to notes. Her voice is very high pitched and it's broken, and she pauses a lot and she says and she, you know, all those things that you think that strong, powerful women have a certain degree of perfection to that when they deliver and they give speech, you know, she's a perfect example of how you can be afraid and do it anyway. But you can show that you're full of fear, and you can do it anyway, and you can lead the United Nations, and you
go beyond the fear,
and you can go beyond the fear. But not even beyond the fear to give the most amazing speech, you know, known to man. Just beyond the fear to be able to even stand up there and open your mouth and say what you need to say. And there's actually a really wonderful line that I think was a direct quote from her, which of course I'm not going to remember. Which is that. Oh, I'm not going to remember it. But it's something to do with...
Answers on a postcard, please.
Because she's giving advice to her lover, Hick, who's coming to her for advice because she has to give a speech. And she basically says, you have to get up and do it and say it, because what you have to say is more important than the fear. And so if you've got something to say that is more important than the fear, then no matter what is going on for you inside in terms of terror and stage fright, and you know that you've got a high-pitched voice and weak and that, you know, But because she believed, I believe, that because she believed that what she had to say was so important, and it was what she had to say. First of all, she was a brilliant writer, and she wrote most of what she said in public.
Yes.
Is she was transforming lives. The amount of work that she did that transformed people's lives, you know, people from, you know, rough families, low-income families, you know, being the voice of the New Deal, of Franklin's New Deal, going out onto the streets and actually
hugely enlightened person.
Oh my gosh, you know, and because I think she knew that what she was doing was showing the American people that they were protected, that they were heard, that there was a way out of the mess that the country was in, and that even though she said and and had this high-pitched voice, and she knew that she was judged for her looks and her voice, she knew that what she was doing was so important that she needed to do it anyway.
Boy, could we do with her now.
Oh my God.
I want to ask you before we go to the audience.
With both of them.
Plenty of time for questions, both online and here in person with you lovely people. But just let me, while you prepare and while the mics are starting to roam, I wanted to ask you, the great Toni Morrison once said that there's, as an artist, as a writer, with each characterization, with each book, there's a little less of you left as an artist. It kind of rubs away your essential nature. And I wonder if, given this great panoply already of characters you've played, we've discussed 7 of them. What's left? Is there anything left in the tank? And if there is, what is the character? Who is the character that you'd love to play? I
mean, it's a, you know, I haven't, you know, I'm constantly playing women who have their shit together. Or if they don't, they do enough of the time that they're holding, you know, there's a roof over their head, and, you know, and I'm really, I'm really interested in playing someone who is struggling quite a lot more than, you know, who is really having a hard time either making ends meet or is, you know, proper. I played a few alcoholics, but you know, properly an addict, or, you know, I hate to use this word, but this, I do mean this, degenerate.
So if I understand you correctly, what you want to do is play a serial killer who's really got her shit together. Can't wait. Right, let's go for some questions. Stick your hand up. We've got some at the front right away, second row. Where are the mics?
Oh, you could probably just yell it at this point.
I think so, but it's fairer, I think, to the people who are watching online to you. Can you come down? If you've got a mic in your hand, start asking your question. Save time. Down here. We'll get to you.
Hello, Gillian. Are you able to address the rumours about you playing Sarah Paulson's wife, potentially?
I was literally, after some of the posts about, you know, throwing my name in the hat on my behalf, right? I emailed one of my agents in the States, and she said, she's a 30-something, 6-foot-tall professional football player. Like, she's, like, you know, one of the best football players in the world, and has about 30 pounds of muscle on me. So no, I would say probably not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I think we've got one right down here in the front.
Yeah, plenty down here.
Sorry, thank you. If you could be one of your characters for a day, if you could live as any one of them, who would it be and why? And I love you, and I think you're amazing.
Probably Stella Gibson. Woo! I mean, I don't say Jean, but I kind of feel like I live Jean's life. More and more so, the more embarrassing I get in the eyes of my sons. But it would probably be quite fun to play Stella for a day, just because she's so smart, and as such, I really like the way her brain works in the show, and also I wish that I could be a detective, actually. I'd love to, but I'm too stupid and too clumsy and don't take enough stuff in. I feel like I'm present, but on the other hand, I miss like 3/4 of what is right in front of my eyes. And also nobody would buy, if I knocked on people's doors or I like showed up at a crime scene, people would be like, isn't that Gillian Anderson? So it would be really nice to actually get to do it like for real, because I'm Stella Gibson.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you still have a question? Okay.
Hi.
Sorry, I know you're meant to be in control. I'm not going to take control.
In my English class, we've been studying Great Expectations. So we watched a couple of versions of the book. And I thought that your version was really interesting. I was just wondering, what do you think Miss Havisham is a symbol for in the novel?
Oh, golly. Gosh.
A nation's exam passes depend on you. No pressure.
I mean, she's trapped. She's the embodiment of a woman who is trapped in an old-fashioned ideal of what a woman's role is meant to be, and that was in part why I chose to use a particular voice that I did too, because I felt like she was almost frozen in time as the 18-year-old that she would have been when she was at the altar. Am I right?
Yeah. I think so. And I kind of studying disappointment,
actually,
you know, and how you can live a whole life, as it were, impacted by disappointment and what it does to you.
Yeah.
How it shapes her cruelty.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
I mean, that was so evident in the way you played her, because she wasn't just some mad person. She was a suffering person, right?
Yeah, definitely. And just eaten away with resentment and sorrow and self-pity, and none of those things attractive characteristics, but at the same time, kind of understandable and timeless, and particularly given the era that we're talking about, you know.
So just cut and paste all that, you'll get an A. Yes, right there. And then we'll go further back.
Hi, what's up?
What's up?
I just wanted to know, how was it to work with Lily Rabe?
Oh, to what? How it was to work? I mean, it was so great.
Sorry, can we have that question again? Because I know some people wouldn't have heard that.
How was it to work with Lily Rabe, who plays Eleanor Roosevelt's lover, I will say, Hick. She was great. I mean, I've seen some of the episodes now, and the scenes between the two of them, at least in the early episodes that I've seen, are really special. And I don't know what, I mean, I know what we were aiming for, and it seems like we might have achieved what we were aiming for, but I don't know why we're shocked, because they are, that there's a different quality that Hick brings out in Eleanor, and almost a girlishness and a softness and a giddiness, and yet Lily is she's so still, and she's so she's a curious. She's very, very unique. She's a wonderful woman. I really enjoyed working with her. She was a delight, and but I feel like it was because it was her. It was because of how she listened, how her Hick listened to Eleanor, that it allowed this other aspect of Eleanor to come out. Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's take a couple of questions from online.
We've got a huge response online from audience members all around the world.
Okay.
I'm just going to read out two for the purposes of
efficiency.
Okay. So Courtney joined via the Living Knowledge Network, and Courtney asks, when working with a new writer,